Hi, folks. One of the most frequently asked questions I get is, how do I find a Zen teacher? And unfortunately, my answer is I don't know. And that might sound weird to you because obviously I had two Zen teachers. I've met a lot of other Zen teachers, so I must know where to find Zen teachers. But when I was a little sprout of a student, the way I found my two main teachers was so happenstance and so odd that I don't think it applies to anybody. I found my first Zen teacher when I took a class called Zen Buddhism at Kent State University that I took on a whim, and I've told this story many times. Tim McCarthy, as it happened, lived right behind me. I lived in a apartment complex called Silver Meadows, which was often nicknamed by its residents Silver Ghettos, and Tim lived in another building in Silver Ghettos that was separated from the building I lived in by a parking lot. So he was very close. That was weird, that I should be living that close to my teacher, and he was right there. In the case of Nishijima Roshi, I just moved to Tokyo from living in the city of Takaoka for a year in Japan, and I found this newspaper which was called the Tokyo Classifieds. I think it's called something else now. And it was a free English language newspaper aimed at expats, and there was an advertisement section in the back, and one of the ads said, "Come and listen to the Zen teacher Nishijima Roshi give lectures on Saturdays." So I went. I tend to be somewhat skeptical of standard sort of Buddhist woo-woo, to quote, Sam Harris, woo-woo explanations of things. But there's a sort of standard idea within Buddhism that if you're a student of Buddhism, a Buddhist monk, then after you die, lifetime after lifetime, the group of monks will tend to meet each other in subsequent lives. If I believed that, I would probably look upon my weird happenstance encounters with Tim McCarthy and Nishijima Roshi as examples of that. But I don't necessarily believe that. I just kind of throw it out there for whatever that's worth. But one thing I will say is sometimes you gotta look hard, and sometimes that involves taking some effort on your part. I spoke in a previous video about this idea of online Zen and Zen that can be delivered to your doorstep. I'm a little suspicious of that, and I told the reasons why. I think there has to be some effort on the part of the student, even though I'm a bad example of effort on the part of the student. You either have luck or you have effort. Maybe your particular karma is to be separated from your teacher by distance, and you have to go and overcome that somehow, and maybe that is part of the path for you. Another thing I'd like to mention is if someone had asked me in 1982 or 3, whenever it was, are there any Zen teachers in Kent, Ohio? I would have just laughed at that question, because obviously there are no Zen teachers in Kent, Ohio, especially in 1982. And yet there was one, right around the corner from me. So things are sometimes not where you expect them to be. And even though these days we have Google with unlimited search capabilities that's pretty good, it doesn't always solve every problem of this nature, of finding a Zen teacher. So I think it's good to spend some time just searching for your teacher. I suppose the corollary to that question would be, how do I know if I found a real Zen teacher or not? And that one's a little tricky to answer. You can certainly go by things like certifications and such like and see who the teacher's teacher was. Any real Zen teacher will be able to point to a lineage and will be able to tell you who their teacher was. And these days, with all the information that I just mentioned on Google and the internet, you'll probably be able to look up their teacher and find out what that teacher was like. As to what that means, if somebody's teacher is this person, all it really means for sure is that there was a trust between these two people, between the teacher and the person you're presumably speaking to and auditioning as your teacher, that this person vouches for that person, and then there's a person who vouched for that person, and a person who vouched for that person, and on down back 1,000 years or so. And you can kind of look at this lineage of people vouching for each other. Whether there's any cosmic significance to that or not, I don't know. Often there are people who have been vouched for, but who become kind of dubious later on. So you gotta watch for that. There's a few simple things to kind of look out for. Look out for teachers who are too eager to make you their student. I find that's probably not good. I feel like a teacher and student relationship is a bit like a marriage, and if you met somebody who on the first date wants to marry you, or even the second or third or fifth date, you'd be suspicious of that. I would be suspicious of a teacher who is very eager to make you their student. Money's a consideration too, but understand that every Zen center is operating at a deficit. So all teachers, including me when I'm teaching at Angel City Zen Center and when I do these videos, have to ask for money because that's the way we work. But the thing to watch out for is maybe if you start seeing that money going to something that seems a bit opulent, and if you see that the teacher's getting very wealthy, there are a few very wealthy Zen teachers out there, especially in America these days, which surprises me because you'd think that would be impossible. It's certainly been impossible for me, but it happens, and I'm suspicious of people who manage to work the Zen teacher thing into something that can make them a whole lot of money. Not of people who can do it such that they can make a reasonable living and live somewhere decent, but people who are, for example, Genpo Roshi with his 3 houses, one of which is in Hawaii. I would be a little bit suspicious of somebody who can roll the Zen teacher thing into 3 houses, one of which is in Hawaii. That's a little shaky. Those sort of things I would watch out for. Another question that I got recently related to this question was how to be your own mentor. And that's an interesting one, because one of the big ideas in Zen is that you have to have a teacher. That doesn't exactly mean necessarily that you have to have a board certified person who you're going to see every single day or live with or something like that. But it does mean that it's something that's done in relationship. So Zen is not just a single introspective teaching that you do on your own, or a single introspective practice that you do on your own. It's something that's done in relationship with others, one other person, or maybe multiple other people. So the idea of needing to have a teacher is, on the one hand, the superficial sort of meaning of have a teacher, which everybody kind of, I think, understands. But there's also the idea of being open to being taught by others, to not setting up standards of your own, as the old Zen poem goes. So watch that, because it's very easy to fool yourself, and it's really easy to even fool yourself and tell yourself that you're not fooling yourself. And a teacher can help work on that, and even your friends can help you work on that. They can tell you you're getting a little weird or something like that, and try to make that clear to you. I don't know how else to say it other than that. Just listen to your friends. They might not always be right, but listen to them anyway, and consider what they say, and consider what your teacher says. And sometimes you won't recognize your teacher immediately. This is a story I always tell about Nishijima Roshi, is that when I first discovered him in the Tokyo Classifieds and went to his classes, I was sitting with him mainly because he taught in English, and it was interesting what he taught, and the time and the place were reasonably convenient. It was an hour and a half train ride to get to his place, so it took a big chunk out of my Saturdays every time I went there. So remember that it's not always right next door, and it's not always instantly delivered to your inbox. But so it was convenient enough. But when I was first encountering him and watching him, I kept thinking that, well, this guy will do for now, but I have to find my real teacher, because this guy obviously isn't it. He was politically conservative. That came up. He wasn't vehemently politically conservative. It would only come up if somebody specifically asked him a political question. He never ever sort of tried to give us his politics. But when it came up, you'd go, "Oh, that guy's kind of a conservative, isn't he?" And I was not. And he was old, and a lot of the ways he taught were weird to me. But yet we found a synchronization with each other. I think he noticed it before I did, and I realized that he was my teacher after a long, long time. So sometimes you won't immediately recognize it. I would say it's probably good to give people a try, maybe give some things the benefit of the doubt if you're a little bit shaky on them, if they're not too egregious or something. I don't know what you might encounter specifically, but kind of, in my case, I had to kind of put the fact that he liked George W. Bush aside, and things like that. And try to see the inner stuff. This is one of the reasons I'm kind of always hammering on about politics and trying to keep that out of Buddhism, because I found a teacher who was not politically aligned with me, who I thought was my true teacher. I don't think these things are necessarily that important. So differences like that, and if you don't like his taste in music or something like that, a lot of things like that can be put aside that you might think are important but aren't really that important to the teacher and student relationship. And finally, I'd like to restate what I've said in other videos, which is that I think the best sort of Zen teacher-student relationship is a bit like an apprenticeship, which is if you go to apprentice with a potter, which is the example I gave the last time I brought this up, you're probably going to be asked to come in, and you can help the potter clean his pottery wheels or do menial jobs, but you're probably not going to get a lot of lessons as such. And most Zen teachers don't give lessons as such. It's just a matter of trying to synchronize this practice and see how somebody else does it, and see how that can work for you, because it's a very individualistic thing in some ways, even though it's also a very universal thing. So I'm sorry I didn't give a good answer to how to find a teacher. I wish I could give you a nice XYZ, step 1, step 2, step 3 version of how to find a teacher. If you Google around, I think there's a few people who have done that, and sometimes their advice is good, and sometimes it's not that good. But you can look at those and see what you think. And speaking of asking for money, there are PayPal and Patreon links below. That is how I make my living. I really appreciate all of your continued support, and I hope you find a teacher who's good for you, and thanks a lot. See you later. Goodbye.